Right, I'm with Deputy Warr.
Warr,
Got it wrong already. We've been following him sort of during the elections. 22nd of June he got elected as Deputy for St Helier South.
Correct.
Number 4, there's four people elected for that district. Now, obviously after that you were a deputy. First time being a deputy,
Sure.
you had to go into the royal court.
Absolutely.
And there was a swearing-in process.
Swearing in, and an interesting swearing-in process because you have the opportunity to either be godly or not, as it were. You know, so which I guess that's fair play. You know, once upon a time you did all sorts of things to God, didn't you? You got married in a church and all sorts of things. But nowadays, is the word "heaven knows anything goes"? I think is that the. I'm not sure if that's too casual away. But anyway, no. What it does now is it takes into consideration different people have different views on life, and that's fair enough. That's our modern society.
Some people challenge whether there should be an oath at all because it shows a conflict. But there we are. That's not today's issue.
Discussion.
We will come back for that for another day.
Sure.
The agenda, what do they say to you? I mean, they go in there, they phone you up and say, you've got to come and be sworn, whatever they do. Who do you actually swear to on behalf of?
Well, good question. I mean, I guess it's to the Queen, isn't it? You swear an oath to the Queen. The bailiff is stood in front of you and all of the officials are there. I mean, it's a slightly, I guess, archaic methodology used here, but I guess it's one of those things where you've now become I guess a legal position, isn't it? It's no longer, you're no longer just the man or woman on the street. You've now got proper responsibilities. And if you decide you want to stand down, for instance, you have to put a request in to the bailiff or, so it's not it becomes a matter of state and it becomes very serious.
Do you raise your hand individually as each person?
Correct.
And so you're sworn in as Deputy for of what exactly?
Deputy of South St Helier. Yes, that's right.
They swear you in for specifically. They say that, do they?
Now, do you know what? I can't remember off the top of my head. It seems such a long time ago now. But you can call me a liar. But I believe you are. I think it's just your name is read out as elected as a deputy, if my memory serves me right. But I'm sure there'll be plenty out there who will tell me if I'm wrong.
Right, because I'm trying to see at what point there's a differentiation between deputies and constables. Do the constables get sworn in the same day, same procedure?
I guess so. I mean, again, there was a whole bunch of us going in there, and back-to-back benches. So your name is called out. You stand up. You put your hand up. You agree to become a deputy, and the deed is done.
Part of the oath is or was to uphold and maintain the laws and usages of the island.
Okay.
Now I don't know if you remember saying
you may
yes to that.
have done that. Yeah.
They don't give you a big book of what the laws and usages are.
Correct.
How do you know what they are?
That's a really good question. I guess if you're diligent, you would go through all of the. I get it's one of these funny things, isn't it? You trust in the process. You believe that many have gone before you and have accepted the rules that you are going to abide by. So you're the next cohort, as it were, who will come in and do that again. But I mean, absolutely valid question. Maybe there is something deep down there that I don't want to deal with, and it may be 100-year-old something or whatever. I'm
trying to find out. Now they've changed the format. There were senators. Did they have to swear as well as deputies?
I'm guessing so. But as I say, the senators are before my time, obviously.
Of course, but your leader of your group was a senator.
Sure.
She's now did she have to go and swear again, fresh for a deputy?
Deputy, yes, correct.
She had to
I think I was sat next to Christina Moore. Yeah.
Right. Because I'm also interested in what's the difference from a swearing in, I'm going to do this sort of view, for constables and deputies. Do you represent different people to the ones that the constables represent?
That's a very good question, and I think you better go into the bailiff's office and ask them, or the gref probably will be able to tell you the technicalities on all of that. The main thing is I'm representing a group of individuals
600 people voted
who've decided that I'm worthy of being their representative, I guess, at the end of the day. That's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? You know, and obviously things have moved on since then.
Where do I want to take you? Now you've got this job.
Yes,
how did you know you got the job as minister?
Well, the ministerial position was a series of phone calls are made, obviously, around the place. Is this a post you would be interested in? I've always been interested in a doing department, as it were, and I think you have this weird big department called infrastructure. So it's infrastructure, environment, and housing. IHE as it's called now, and which is handled by 3 different ministers. It's a massive department, and thankfully I was interested actually going for the infrastructure ministry, because I thought that's a nice one, you can get to grips with it all. However, having now seen the level of engagement required and the number of people involved in that department, I'm actually rather relieved I didn't actually take that one on board. And you could say thrown from one area into the fire of housing, but the thing with housing, which is now changed, is the states no longer own their own house. Don't run their own housing. They've got this arm's length organisation.
This is
now,
something I want to discuss.
which I think was a genius move. To be honest with you, it really was. Whoever came up with that one, I think that was a great move. So now we're what we call policymakers. So my job is, with my team, and a very small team, is to try and develop what we call housing policy, and that's across the board from homelessness to obviously.
Do you?
State
I mean, I don't want to get on too far.
Yes, sure.
The team you've got 2 civil servants. You've got a secretary.
I have a secretary and I have a policy leader.
And you've
correct.
been praising them and say what a good job they do.
Totally.
They're nothing to do with policy.
Well, they are. Well, no, my secretary obviously helps me in terms of organising my day and making sure I do all sorts of things. But then I have a policy development officer who leads on policy in housing. So, and then we will have people providing information to us to help us inform our decision making.
Because you don't build houses, as you say.
Correct.
Andium build whatever houses, and they decide.
And JDC do as well. Jersey Development Company do as well. There's another arm's length organisation, and then you obviously have all the housing trusts as well.
Because housing used to be responsible for doing that.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, they used to be responsible for your other little bête noire which you've got yourself into, the rent tribunal.
Yes, absolutely.
And they used to be sharing the same office, and it was the same man for a while.
Right.
And they had awful problems.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Back in pre-2030. Andium came on the scene, and that's all changed.
Yes.
But the role of Andium have got, they're sort of a government department in their own because they decide they're going to build.
Correct.
It's not you. That ought to be you. In the past it was, but sometimes the housing president as was.
Yeah.
Some years they built no houses at all.
And that's a historic problem, and that's a problem that's being played out today, in terms of trying to play catch up. And as much as people go, oh yeah, there's thousands of houses being built, there's way too many houses being built, it's actually a lot of it is historical catch up. So, and also the great thing which Andium has done has been to improve the quality of the housing. I think when the states actually own their own houses, from what I understand, there was some pretty awful, the quality of build was poor.
They ran up a huge failure to maintain.
Maintenance bill.
They finished up with 25 million, which because they hadn't, and they were paying it off, and I think they're still paying it off now. I think that's part of why Andium is strapped for money, because a lot of it is making up for. Anyway, was that.
Yeah, that's the past, obviously. Yes.
Back in Deputy Pryke's day, I say she had 1.5 assistants, and she had. I don't know who wrote it for her, but she had a data I must discover list, which was almost identical to the one that you've thrown yourself into, because there was no great filing cabinet full of data.
That's the problem, and that's the huge problem we have. And the data is out there in all its disparate forms, in different departments have different requirements. But the problem I have is trying to find out. We're going to be appointing someone in the data management side of things who will be just making sure that we're collecting the right data in a timely fashion so that we can make timely decisions. The thing which I hate is making decisions on bad data. And you just can't do that.
Well, this is it. It's always going to be bad data because it's a changing.
Oh, it's a very dynamic market. I agree with you, and I think from my perspective, that's why I think I, as a minister, my team need to keep in touch with the market, people who are developing the market, the private sector developers, as much as we do the public sector developers. So that, because what I found is the private sector developers are very much more looking forward, whereas interestingly enough, the state side of thing tends to be looking backwards.
Yes.
So
of course, you don't. I mean, your budget. You don't have a budget to do much, do you?
No, I have a budget to employ somebody.
That's right.
but we do have this infamous ring-fenced £10 million, which my predecessor got, which we're kind of trying to determine what to do with that. So we do have some money to try and do something. So the danger is you see a wonderful, like so many, in the state sector, you see this pot of money, you go, hey, how are we going to spend it, kind of thing. And I think what we have to do in housing, and it's become very evident to me, is we have to be very, very careful and very strategic about how we use that money.
Many years ago, again, you've got
Yes, sure.
That's a study which I engineered.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know if you've got that in your filing cabinet.
We probably do, somewhere deep in the
It was
bowels
St John
of...
Rabillard, a brilliant advocate.
Yeah.
He's dead now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wrote these, one on Jersey, one on Guernsey. And they're very academic.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course he died, this is 1984.
Okay.
But the background of actually setting this up was quite, you can see the history.
Yes, yeah.
And all the prejudices that there were about housing and immigrants, and it's all there because it's the formative years.
And also, I would say, someone sent me a report from 1970 of the housing minister from then, when we were talking about slum clearances.
Exactly.
In St Helier. I mean, and it really quite an interesting read, because he made the observation that how is the average man going to ever be able to afford a house if we don't support them?
Exactly.
I mean, here we are, whatever,
same issues.
50 years further down the track, and the issues
Actually
are
worse now.
more extreme and more extreme.
Worse, because people did manage to buy. They did manage to get little states loan houses for £3,000, £4,000, and it was happy days.
Well, yeah, you say happy days. Obviously, what happened was you said states loan, and it's interesting you should talk about states loans, because something I'm investigating at the moment is, why did that system fall apart? Why did we give up on the states loan mechanism? And it appears, and this is from just initial studies, and I'm sure there are much more expert people out there, but back in the day, in the 1970s, interest rates were significantly higher than they are today. And what happened was the states of Jersey were able to loan money at a far cheaper rate than the banks were.
Well, it was a maximum of 12%. Used to go down to 3%.
Right.
I was offered private one to buy a little cottage, 20+%.
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly even look at it.
Exactly. And so that was where that mechanism was right. But apparently what happened was, as interest rates fell away, the state's loan scheme became too expensive. So instead of people approaching the state for a loan, they would just go to their bank and get a cheaper loan. And so it appears to be that that's why the system fell away. Now, I want to research that a lot more, because clearly back in the day it worked for a significant number of people.
I think it did.
Yeah.
But put me back. You arrived in your office.
Yeah.
You've got an office somewhere, or a share
I
of
wish
an
I had an office. We have a shared area.
A shared area.
It's not that glamorous, I'm afraid.
Now, is your secretary available for you all day, or when
Yes. I mean, the secretarial, private sector, you need somebody around all day, and that's why I said I think they go above and beyond, because they're constantly, there is so much pressure on my time. Just simply even having this sit down, is, can I slot this half an hour in to do this? And it's not, to say, oh, aren't we so important? It's just simply that there are so many different areas that people want to talk to you about, and so many people who whether they be planning some new schemes, or whether they be, in population, or whether it be something to do with Social Security, whether it be an important decision about someone who doesn't meet the gateway. There's just a whole plethora of things that happen.
I'm intrigued to know, when you did your swearing in, what did you think you were signing up for? What area?
If I'm honest with you, I don't think anybody really knows. I think you go in there, I don't say a wing and a prayer. I mean, I think what you go in there is you go in there with an idea, that this idealistic idea that you're going to make a difference. You're going to be able to, all the stuff that you criticized people for who were in the States when you were outside, you were going to sort it all out because they were dumb and you have a much smarter answer, than they did. And that's obviously the hope that you come in with. I think the reality is that everybody is trying their best to do the best. However, some people are more capable than others, and it just depends. As you've seen recently, it depends how much you want to put your head above the parapet, and be shot at. Because it's very easy to keep your head down and be out of the gunfire, taking the money and not doing an awful lot.
Now, you're part of a non-party party,
Correct.
a better way, but you are still a group.
Yes, we're a group in a very loose format. I mean, obviously, the Better Way movement, as it turns out, has almost become the government. In a quirky, funny kind of way, bizarrely. But it's No, but we're very, very, a bunch of very independent-minded people.
Well,
who have
that's
very
the
strong
problem, you
views.
see, because you as a minister,
Yep.
housing especially, the sore point in the island
Absolutely.
now
True.
and for many decades past.
True.
It's the sore point. But you haven't got any powers really to do much about it. I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, you say that. I mean, I can be a policy. So, as a policymaker, what you can do is you can say, look, can we free up land for Andean to, can I encourage the infrastructure minister to get Jersey Property Holdings to free up land in this area, please? So I have my power is influence. Is influence.
But the other ministers,
Could turn around and
environment, will say, "Oh no, hell, you're having that piece of land."
And I agree with you. And I think this is where you obviously have the island's bridging plan, which is being determined by the previous state.
Which I think is a total waste of
Well,
time.
maybe you think that, but what it did do was it enabled space to be identified where buildings could be put. Okay, so that's a positive. That saves you kind of arguing over can we build here or can't we build that. Those decisions have already been taken.
Well, decisions have been made. That doesn't mean to say they're going to be followed.
Oh
does
no,
it?
I agree with you. I agree with you. And of course, one of the big challenges from where I'm sitting in terms of housing is I'm competing with green space, which sounds a bit bizarre, but the environmental concerns. I'm competing with houses for education, who want schools built.
Schools.
We obviously have to have infrastructure requirement. In other words, roads and facilities all around that. So there's a tight land mass here, which a lot of people want a little bit of the action, as it were.
Because it used to annoy me intensely when Terry Lamam was housing present. I don't think he ever became a minister.
Okay.
They didn't have
The
them in those
minister of
days. They
those
hadn't
days,
been
yeah,
invented
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
He used to campaign about we mustn't build on green fields. And he
Yeah.
was the housing minister. That's not your business. You're not the planning minister.
Yeah, fair comment.
You
Fair
see?
comment. And I think that's where you have overlap. But just to come back to your point is, and this is why it's so critical now, is this kind of loose coalition. That is a recognition and a respecting of, I understand your issue, and you hopefully understand my issue. Now, where's the middle ground where we can get the best solution for both of us, the best outcome for both of us? I think historically one of the problems is it's either my way or the highway, and I think we've got
That
a much,
was-
and
Don't utter those words.
and I think my take on that is we are quietly developing. You've heard of the regeneration steering group, which are theoretically overlooking, the site and going, right, we can put this group of buildings here or this group there. So hopefully we'll have a new iteration of that going forward, and that will hopefully make decision making easier.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you carry the public along, because the public, to read the documents, you got problems reading the documents.
Yes, yeah.
The public cannot possibly. If you look at the consultation and all the discussions
Yeah.
that went with the little interim planning document,
Absolutely, it's crazy.
absolutely impossible.
And
It's
you-
still sitting over there, over in Moriara House. It's about 2 feet high.
Yeah. And you've sent me many a document over the years that have gone in as well in various emails.
Exactly.
And I mean, over my week's holiday, quote unquote,
Right.
I was
You
reading
don't get holiday.
I was reading one housing report a day, 1.5 housing reports a day
Exactly.
for a week, just to try and catch up with what had gone on with my predecessors and in the past, and what had happened. So the topic is immense in terms of what you do. I think what I try to do is inform myself as much as possible, not to repeat some of the stuff that's gone on before, and that's one of the challenges always. And then to try and set do the vision thing. Can we create a new vision of what this island's going to look like?
The old problem of silos.
Yes.
I mean
That's what we're trying to cut past.
You won't, as long as there are these ministries with different ideas. It's inevitable there's going to be battles.
We haven't had a major battle yet,
Not
okay?
yet.
And I'm sure those may come down the route. But I think what's great about the new team, and that is that we haven't had anybody, Christina Moore's team, as it were, who she wanted in the Council of Ministers, she's been able to get them elected intact, as it were, without individuals who maybe don't have a similar viewpoint. So I think we've started off in a good place in that we are, people talk about independence, I know, as opposed to parties and things like that, but we are a bunch of independent, and I have total confidence in, and this is not me just towing the political line, but I have total confidence in every single minister in all of their departments. So and their ability to communicate with me and my ability to communicate with
Are
them.
you happy that within the 100 days all the various ministers will come together and they'll have a cohesive, coordinated plan to proceed onwards, because you're discovering what has all been hidden in the cupboard on your department. They'll all be doing the same in their departments. Are they going to have sufficient agreement about how to proceed?
Well, I think the 100 days has been really interesting, because basically it's forced everybody to get running at speed, going forward. Now, will it be a perfect document? Of course it won't. It'll have to be certain compromises in various areas. But what's good about it is it's a serious action plan, and I think the main thing which we desperately need on this island is action. We need stuff moving forward. We need people making decisions, and tough decisions. And what the 100 days has done is, regardless of whether you believe it will achieve or what it won't achieve, it's really focused the minds around action.
You dared to mention rent tribunals. In fact, you were sort of claiming that it was you who brought this proposition, but there were already 2 propositions in.
Absolutely right.
Deputy Morel, or whatever he was, Morel, and also Labby, the housing minister, who you dethroned.
Yes, yeah.
Labby, he had proposition in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've come along and you've put another version of it in.
Yeah.
Now,
but the difference which I'm doing now is trying to elect a panel. Okay, so I'm moving this on. All right, so where the controversies come about is the election of the panel and the panel members. Dare I say it, my dear friend Deputy Sam Mezek, when he was housing minister, had exactly the same opportunity to set up a panel, and he didn't do it.
But there was a panel set up which never seemed, about 2013, and the guy who runs the wheelchair service, he was chair of it, and there was the ex-housing minister, I think he was on it. There was 4 people set up. I don't think it ever met or didn't. For some reason, something killed it. I don't know what. I can't quite find out what killed it.
I don't know whether no cases came forward. I have just no idea at all. I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I've tried to move this on and go right. Let's get a panel. Let's get a panel up and running, and then who incidentally are going to be up for re-election in April next year. So
it's only a 12-month job.
It's not even. That's right, exactly. And well, it won't even be 12 months for the new panel. It will only be 6 months. But the point being is that there's been such a clamour about landlords increasing rents unfairly, etc., and nowhere for the tenant to go and challenge the landlords for so long. It just staggers me that a panel hasn't been put in place before my time. And what's so interesting is the panel which I've put forward, and I know it's got there is this controversy around one individual in particular, but we had 10 people actually apply. It was all done fair and square. Jersey Appointments Commission, the advert was put out there. Everybody was interviewed. I think the most important one was the chairperson, that they got, who incidentally is also involved with the homelessness area. So I think regardless of whether he's a landlord or whatever, he's done a huge amount of good work. Now, I think what concerns me is it isn't perfect, and I get that, and this is why Reform have now come along with their alternative proposition. And I think it's actually really healthy for democracy that we open up these sort of areas.
As the rules are, and I don't think necessarily as the scheme was, you've inherited, it does allow you to have a fifth.
Correct.
Now, I would have thought it wouldn't be too difficult to extend that to maybe several more.
The law is a 1948 law.
Exactly.
So it's and it's all well and good saying, let's extend it, let's amend the law. You can imagine law draftsmen will have a fun time. They're already up to there somewhere. We will spend another year, 2 years rewriting the law to allow us to have
because I'm having a bit of a bargey, and I think it'll grow a bit if I have my way. And him, for example, have what they now call it a tenants director, as a tenants representative.
Okay.
Now, I went to be interviewed for it years ago, and they wanted to pay me £15,000, and I said no, I would refuse to accept any money. If you have tenants reps who are paid, then they're conflicted. Now, they have got a tenants rep who is paid, and I've never heard anything from her or never seen any invitation to make a comment about anything. Who she actually represents, I don't know, but she gets 15 grand. You know, and that to me.
Well, all these people on the panel are not paid a penny.
Right.
Okay, so there's no payment being made, you know, for these people. These people are doing it because they feel they want to help society and move forward, regardless of whether, you know, this word landlord is always sort of shoved in your face all the time.
We know nobody knows what it actually means, landlord.
Yeah, you know, but what I get depressed about is do we move things forward, reinstate a panel which is imperfect, and I acknowledge it's imperfect. I will endeavour to encourage another individual to stand, you know, to go out there. But we've already, I know, reached out to some of the organisations which Deputy Southern has suggested we have on this council, and they have shown complete disinterest.
I thought it was unusual, the appointments panel, because the appointments panel is generally dealing with the top jobs.
Yep.
£100,000 plus salaries. No, I couldn't quite understand how they got involved with that. If we can't make those sorts of decisions amongst ourselves, I was right. Why that?
Really good question. And to be honest with you, I'd love to know the Jersey Appointments Commission. I'd love to know, you know, I'm interested to know a bit more about their formation. What was their thinking? And I'm presuming they were formed because to remove political influence from those who were selected. So it's quite interesting that these names have come forward. I'm now expected to have political interference because, my mate didn't get on the panel.
That's
why
right.
isn't he there or she there? You know, and but then it's the wrong people on the panel. You know, kind of, I feel like I'm stuck between the devil and deep blue sea. If I don't put forward the names that have been given to me, and I'm reassured that only 4 individuals they felt were of the standard that was required to sit on this panel, and then I'm told, you know, I'm criticised because they're the wrong kind of people. They don't meet that. I just kind of go, well, what do we do? Do we go back and hold off another year when everybody's crying out for a panel and a tribunal panel, etc.?
Well, there was a huge.
Or do we?
The most interesting case was a case of Mr. Seymour Tett, who was a so-called, as the rich immigrant he was, a very nice chap, and he came. He had a battle with, and of course the battle then was the guy. He became the Jorat Hamilton. And he used to run everything. He was running the housing committee. He was running the rent tribunal. He was running everything. Mr. Fix-It. Now it was but it showed the sort of flaws that can arise. That was years and years and years ago. Now, obviously, you can't expect people to know all this.
No.
But somewhere in the housing minister's portfolio, there ought to be a little resume of that case. Don't go down there because that is a time bomb.
I haven't seen it.
No.
so I would say, and this is the other interesting thing about my job and the speed with which you have to come up to speed, is there is a huge amount of history out there, and I am forever being sent bits of history of what's gone on, you know, in beforehand. I obviously understand what my predecessor, Deputy Labby, did, and obviously we're carrying forward one or two of the policies that, and continuing on some of his ideas, because otherwise you're just going to simply go start all over again, and that's a pointless exercise. Try and pick up on what I believe are the best bits, and then try and move on with ideas that I believe are important now.
So you let yourself in for this rent tribunal, but you didn't come. That wasn't the first thing. You were going around looking at empty houses.
Yeah, correct.
Now there were somebody with knowledge had decided there were 4,000 empty houses.
Well, this is not somebody. This was from the census.
Right, the census, but it was an official person employed to do.
Yeah, correct.
Analysing figures. Now you come out after about a week. You said, "Well, there's only 300." Now, okay, you know better than the statisticians do.
But the census is basically empty houses is a very generic term. So those could be under development, they could be being transferred, ownership it could be transferred. There are all sorts of reasons why properties remain empty. What you really want to understand is I'm more interested in properties that have been, quote, abandoned almost. In other words, deliberately been left empty 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it's been an eye-opener to see the number of people who have sent me photographs of sites that are boarded up. You know, what's extraordinary on this island is the price of land is so expensive. We've got a homelessness issue. You know, we have people struggling to buy property, yet somehow, and you said I came up with the number 300. I think the number is between, we've been trying to refine this number. It's between 300 and 800. This is where we're up to at the moment, and there's more analysis going on that way. But somehow, it doesn't matter. Let's say the number's 500. 500 homes have been abandoned on this island. I mean, what is the asset value of those 500 homes? It's a phenomenal amount of money. But then if you turn them back into homes again, you're talking about, well, I came up with a number of 1,000 homes, if you do the multiplication, do the numbers on it, but it could be 1,500. It's a quarter, it's 25% of our housing problem.
That 4,000 figure has been kicking around for years. There was nothing new about that.
Well, it was 10 years ago, it was 3,000.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
so it was a really substantial number.
Yeah.
It wasn't really challenged then. There was discussion about it.
So why
shock horror.
Why didn't anybody do anything before
Exactly, and on so many things. Homelessness.
Yeah.
Well, as you were saying, how many people are homeless?
Yeah.
What is homeless?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we're bringing a definition to the States to say this is homelessness, and which is really good at long last. I mean, what's interesting is what it'll enable us to do is to collect a lot more data and information around that subject matter. Now, it's one thing to collect information, it's another thing to do something with it. So I think this is where you cross over from, does the housing minister need to provide more houses for the homelessness carrier, or do we need to resource that part of the world more effectively and more efficiently? And I think that becomes a social security issue. Not that I want to punt these things into other departments, but the point.
It's going to happen.
But the point being is that what it is, it's a recognition there is an issue here. Are we looking after it carefully enough? Because in the end, it's a stain on our society, isn't it? That's the reality. We want people to move out.
You have no obligation to house anybody. There is no obligation to house anybody in Jersey.
Right.
If somebody's homeless, you can just say, well, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's what you can say.
But we have a moral responsibility.
Well, maybe there is.
Yes, yeah, and I feel that's a very strong issue for me.
Right.
I think there's a real moral case for it all, and I think this is why I think really one of my probably objectives, if I look over the horizon in 4 years' time, is home ownership, is to try and get more people with what I call skin in the game. In other words, if you're renting maybe at the moment, and we can get you moved from renting to maybe slowly buying a property or getting building an asset over your lifetime, I think that's a good thing to try and achieve. We recognise there are lots of people can't afford that. They will always stay in rented property, and that's how it is, and that's the way of life. But if we can move people forward in their life, I think that's got to be a good thing.
All the time I've been in Jersey, nobody ever has built a new lodging house.
Yeah.
Lots of people have converted clapped out guest houses and hotels to be sort of rentable. Now, even that business has sort of been knocked on the head. I don't know if anybody's doing any conversions.
Yeah.
But it's not only people without quals, but anybody can live in a lodging house. That's the nature of them. But it's what are you going to do about the non-quals?
Well, this is a really $64 million question, because what we recognise, that 0 to 5 year area is a major problem on this island. It's causing all sorts of stress in terms of families.
Absolutely.
Because people are overcrowding. We recognise that. So and our problem is a lot of our immigrant workforce live in unqualified housing,
Exactly.
which is again unregulated. So it's the worst of every world in that part. So what do we as a government have to do that? Now, first thing is unqual still valid? Is it still fit for purpose?
Well, I've got the answer, but
and my take on that is, if it is no longer fit for purpose, then I think you have to turn around and say, okay, so what happens if Granny and Grandma want to come over? Suddenly you open up the non-qual market to your friends and relatives who can come along. There has to be some link to employment in some way, shape or form if you
when
do
Mr.
that.
Rebillard wrote this study in 1984, all those issues were discussed then, and they're still being discussed
now. But I think the problem we have now is the problem has become extreme. Is absolutely extreme, because at a base level we have key workers. We're struggling with key workers, finding nurses and all the rest of it. We're struggling to find cleaners. We're struggling to find baristas in coffee shops. Because that
regulation,
workforce,
policy, law, what it is biting you. It wasn't supposed to bite the ordinary Jersey guy. It was
correct, and that's the problem. But of course, it's been amplified by Brexit. So,
Absolutely.
and the problem which Jersey finds itself is this common travel area where we are perceived as being one of the barriers into the UK.
So you, as Housing Minister, are immediately dealing with Overseas Minister, Treasury, all these departments are engaged to change what looks like a simple...
Exactly, problem, on the surface.
It's everybody.
And what my argument right now is about, Jersey needs to get its what I call mojo back. I think we have to start going, what's in the interests of Jersey, Jersey PLC, as an island, instead of constantly, think about the Brexit vote. The Brexit vote had nothing, Jersey never got involved with it, yet it's been massively influential on Jersey. So I think it's time Jersey stood up and said, hang on, this isn't right, this is affecting our economy, what are we going to do about it? And I'm sorry, Parliament UK, I know to whom we are beholden, we are going to have to make certain rules which are fit for purpose for us to do.
Well, Bermuda's just run into a big storm with the UK government because the UK government won't ratify some law that they've introduced.
Right.
Now, that's going to happen more and more with all the dependent territories,
Yes.
the overseas territories.
Yep.
They're going to find themselves to deal with these problems. This is our problem, you'll say. This is a Jersey problem, we want to deal with it. But no, because there will be international repercussions.
Yep.
You can't just do it.
Exactly.
And you maybe want to do fishing, but you can't do fishing.
Yep,
All of a
because
sudden that affects your housing. Why on earth does fishing affect housing? Well, it will.
And you're highlighting on all the level of complexity that we're now
Exactly.
dealing with. But I think what we have to do is, instead of going throw your hands up and go, oh, there's nothing we can do, I think we have to just go through each of these lines and go, what is in our interest? How am I going to work with the external affairs? Because at the end of the day, Deputy Joseph is out there selling Jersey overseas and all the rest. He's in contact with individuals. What do we ask Deputy Joseph to ask the French? I noticed he's actually met with one of the French diplomats recently,
Right.
and discussing these exact issues. So I think there's a willingness to get things changed. The challenge is let's make sure we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's, I think, the thing we have to be careful of.
You're only allowed to say that once.
Yeah, thank you. But I think we just have to be careful of that. So we have to understand just how far we can push the boundary. One of the great bits about me being such a newbie in all of this is I don't actually know where the boundaries are.
No.
And maybe in some ways that's
don't.
through Twitter, actually, it's become evident that I don't know where some of the boundaries are.
I wish you'd
and
use-
I've pushed them. And without people challenging me, I then find that I'm now asking questions I never thought I'd ask before.
That's right. I wish you wouldn't use Twitter so much and use Facebook more, because I find Twitter so obscure.
Yeah.
Somebody's made a quote, well, what does it relate to?
I
I can't find where it's come from.
Okay. I'll see if I can develop my Facebook presence
It's hard. It's a
greater
nightmare.
way.
Facebook is a nightmare.
Yeah.
But this is, again, the communication. There's a communications unit,
Yeah.
which is part of the government
I know.
system. But it's not communicating to me.
No, I agree.
don't get invited. I don't get invited to any meetings that are going on. Nothing.
And
They have the accredited press. All these things,
I know.
which all need scrapping.
Well, you say scrapping. I better not. I'm going to upset the comms unit because of all the people who are employed by them. But I think there is a recognition, and I think this is something which the new government is recognising, is that this sense of you can't just push out a paragraph which said, well, there are appropriate times where a set paragraph has to be put out there into the public domain because it's of a very, very serious nature. But I think my feeling on it is, I think people want to hear, what we said at the very beginning, warts and all in some ways, and learn, because I think what you're doing is you're educating me, other people in that environment are educating me as well, and I think we're all learning, and I'm hopefully, by what I'm doing, educating people about the process of
Well,
government.
people
and what
have
government
got a
has to
certain
deal
amount of
with.
knowledge. It may be what's specific to them, but the general public, and this is the huge hurdle, how do you communicate? Find those people who've got knowledge which is worth listening to.
Well, and I agree. Some of it's worthwhile and some of it isn't. And I have to be honest with you, what I do is I do pick up on some of the stuff which is really interesting and novel ideas, and I do challenge my department with saying, we've been approached with this. What do you think about this? It was interesting you talk about this 1948 law and my ability to appoint an additional member to that. I didn't know this at all. Someone on Twitter mentioned it and said, couldn't you extend the panel? And I went, hang on, let's go that. So we went back to the law and hey, presto, the law says you can do something.
Could have asked me.
Well, thank you. Well, you are part of that wider general public, who pay, and this is the other thing, Mike, is you pay real interest in all of this.
I try to.
And what's going on. A lot of people, it just passes them by.
No, of course it
and
does.
it doesn't matter to them, but actually it does matter to them. And I'm trying very hard to increase that engagement, increase that awareness, that actually I keep coming back to it. We all can make a
It's the
difference.
classic case of trying to make people worry about things they can do nothing about. So why make them worry about it? I mean, this is the dilemma.
But you've just said to me, well, yeah, but nobody
I know.
talks to me. Government doesn't talk to me.
No.
I don't, so when I want government to talk to me,
Yeah.
I want them to talk to me.
I mean,
but
they're-
when I don't want them to talk to me, I don't want them to talk.
Yeah.
Where do you, where do you set the line?
It's very- I sympathise
to do these things.
we've
yeah,
gone-
and
we've
we've probably
gone
gone over
past
time.
your-
That's fine. My little deadline. Okay. Yeah. I'll give-
So,
couple more minutes and
we've
we'll
got
be
about
done.
50 odd days
Yeah.
left of your 100 days. You're furiously writing. Poor
Sure.
your technical assistants
Yep.
will be typing like mad.
Absolutely.
What will happen on that 100 day? The bong will go.
Yep.
What will happen? You will have a report. This is my report from
This is
the
my
Minister for
department.
Housing
Yes, correct.
and Communities. Are you
And
still,
communities. Oh,
you're
yes, they're still there
communities?
in community.
I can't quite work out what communities are.
Well, I always think of communities as building communities. So I always think
Right.
housing is part of that element. In other words, it's not just simply about building houses and creating more houses, creating an environment in which people can enjoy their lives. And I think that's,
Because there are some ethnic groups I know
Hmm.
are not very keen on being a community of, say, Irish community.
Yes, yeah.
They want to be part of the Jersey community.
Totally.
They don't
And,
want to be seen as different.
Yeah. You end up with this ghetto effect, and
Exactly.
you don't want to see, and I certainly for one don't want to see that at all. Yep.
Right, so you're going to produce a document.
Yep.
Where does it go first? Does it go to the States or to your group?
Well, initially we'll obviously there will be a big discussion within the Council of Ministers about the 100-day plan. Have we met all the demands that have been put forward and the ideas put forward? And do we sync, as it were? Make sure we do that. And then I think there is one document I think we have to by law register, isn't there? A strategic plan, our strategic plan,
Right.
and there's a certain date out there.
Right.
Please don't hold me to what the date is, but there are certain legal requirements, and on the financing side as well, we have to make sure that things are funded properly, and that we're not running up some massive bill, because we just fancy spending all the money. So there are lots of very legalistic things to do. But the 100-day plan, and when we get that out and going, that then obviously sets the agenda then for the next 4 years. It will set our stall out for the next 4 years. And what
Where
we're gonna
do
do.
children feature in the grand plan at the moment?
Well, they're part of, you come to housing, but they're part of
Right.
education and children and education. And I think they are they're very high up on awareness
because
level in that.
unfortunately the Children's Commissioner has
Yeah.
gone, and that was
Yeah.
one of her issues, the housing conditions which lots of children
Correct.
live under.
Correct.
Something is not acceptable. And of
Correct.
course, obviously, the worst end of that was the people without quals, because they have to take the worst possible housing.
Yeah.
Now, a policy will need to be to address that,
Mm-hmm.
and it will need to go out to all the other departments, and at some
Yeah.
point they'll all have to agree it, and there will be a lot of disagreement because they'll all have reasons why it can't be done, and then you've got.
I
these-
don't think they'll have agreements where it can't be done, because I just think there's a huge recognition now that if we can't bring up our children in safe environments and
Right.
and do that, I think gone are the days when that was all sort of pushed under the carpet. I think we've moved a long way forward from those days. I mean, I certainly have, and I'm sure my colleagues have as well.
As far as your department is
Yeah.
concerned, your small department,
Yeah.
is our children still the top priority?
They're a big priority.
Not
I don't know
the-
when you
that
say
was
are they
expressed in rather strange
No, no.
words.
Are
wasn't
they
it?
are they the top? How do you define top priority?
I don't know. In other words, definitions, isn't it?
and that's a good question. All as I do know is that with everything, almost every conversation says what's the impact on our children. Every conversation almost ends up with that sentence on it.
Have you signed the pledge yet?
The pledge for
Children, there's a housing had a great thing which they launched. It was the pledge, and they're going part of the top priority. It's all part of the system.
Oh, right,
The
okay.
corporate. What do they call it? The corporate responsibility. So
Okay, I haven't. If I'm honest with you, I
Right.
haven't seen that pledge. It hasn't been put in front of me as
right.
a.
Well,
as
it's
a-
there, but
something
it seems to have
sign.
gone to sleep. But
Okay.
it's,
Okay. Well, again,
it was,
I tell you.
as far as I'm concerned, it was just a gimmick. But there we are. It was put out there.
Right, okay.
So, have you been roasted enough yet? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's. Have I been roasted? I know your idea, but I mean, I think it's no. I just want to keep going. I just want to keep communicating. I think what's really, really good, and despite all this, the rent tribunal issue and all the rest of it, what's really, really good is how our democracy functions. How do we? What this will highlight is the areas where there are maybe weaknesses, where we need to pay more attention to, and it will be discussed in an open forum. There's nowhere to hide in all of this, in all of these discussions, which is really, really important. And I think this is the thing where people get this impression, oh, stuff's done behind closed doors, we don't know what it is until it comes out in the open. I just want to demonstrate, no, it isn't. There is a very, very clear process, and there are reasons why certain decisions are made. And I think, as I said, I have got a huge amount more to learn. I'm learning as fast as is humanly possible. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? If you were an employee and you had your probation period, you would have at least a 3-month probation period where you'd be learning it.
And at the end of the 3 months, they could get rid of you.
They could get rid of you. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree.
See, that's the difference.
Or they can extend your probation.
Exactly.
So they're one or the other. But what I'm saying is that over that 3 months, the reason there is a 3-month probation period is that's the period of time where it is believed by the employer you will either shine or otherwise. You will either get up to speed or you won't. We haven't even had 3 months yet. I think we're only just over 2 months, into this job.
Well, there are already people
already
I believe, states members already talking. I think there's a proposition already on its way to bring back senators. Right. They haven't even left the room yet.
Absolutely. It's slightly bizarre, but I've got to be careful on that front because I agree with you. I think sometimes there's a danger where, we have to get on with the thing of business. But I'm very conscious that was brought forward because it was on a manifesto. It was a manifesto pledge made by one of the ministers. So I feel that they had no option but to put forward that proposition. So this is the danger when you make pledges in manifestos.
Another group that I cannot, as you know, I have great disagreement with is the constables.
Yep.
Now the constables like to interfere in housing to a very large extent.
Yes, yeah.
They like to say if there's going to be a housing scheme or not in their parish.
Yeah.
Now and they also the allocation of houses in their parish. They like because one of the bizarre reasons I didn't realise is that they want people in the parish to be in the honorary system, to support the honorary system.
Yep.
It isn't the housing need which is paramount, it's having like-minded people.
Yeah.
You see, I think that's totally bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think which is interesting, and we had this conversation with a couple in Sombrelard, funnily enough, live in a larger house than they need. They want to move to a smaller house, but they want to stay in the Sombrelard area because that's where they've grown up and all the rest of it. But there is every time some building ideas are put forward, it's clamour, we can't have more building and all the rest of it. And yet, funnily enough, we have a policy which was trying to what we call right-size people, try and free up those larger homes so that families can move into them. And yet we have this counter argument, which is, no, there's already too much building. We can't, So I think what's one of the challenges is trying to get everybody on the same page. To say, look, we know there's a housing issue, there's a housing problem. How can we use our land more efficiently across the island? And it's not just a St Helier issue; it's a St Peter issue, it's a Trinity issue, it's an island-wide issue.
An analysis of all land use, the whole island land use.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that fields are automatically agricultural fields is totally wrong. They are just land.
Yeah. And that's it. And as I say, we've got, I think, quite a journey to go. But I think if I can get that sense of urgency, that sense of priority across with my colleagues about, what are you doing to help alleviate this housing crisis, and people then respond accordingly in a positive way, then hopefully we've made some journey down the track.
I better let you go.
Thank you so much.
I won't ask you if you think coffee might be a good cash crop for Jersey.
I'm afraid we're not high enough in the air.
Thanks for coming.
No problem at all. My pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Around about the 100 days, we
shall meet again. Yes.
Some
sunny day.